What if today were the very day heaven itself opened above you, releasing power, protection, and miracles into your life? September 29th is not a simple mark on the calendar. It is the feast of Saint Michael the Archangel, the Prince of the Heavenly Host, the defender of God's people, and the guardian who stands at the threshold between light and darkness. On this sacred day, the Church invites us to recognize not only a liturgical celebration, but a cosmic reality. The battle of heaven reaches into our lives, and victory is offered to those who call upon the name of Saint Michael with faith. This is not merely remembrance of past battles or distant victories. It is a living encounter, a moment when time and eternity meet, when God's grace is poured out through the hand of His mighty Archangel. Think of the walls in your life that seem unbreakable, the fears that imprison your heart, the trials that repeat themselves like shadows following your steps. What if today, on Saint Michael's day of power, those chains were broken? What if today the sword of light cut through your despair, bringing freedom where you felt trapped? The scriptures remind us of battles that reshaped history, and in each of them the presence of angels revealed God's hand in action. In the book of Revelation chapter 12 verse 7 it is written, "There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and they did not prevail." This eternal truth is not only a memory, it is a living promise. If Saint Michael defeated the dragon once, he continues to fight for the children of God today. And on this very feast day, his intercession becomes a shield and a weapon for those who stand in need of divine strength. Imagine for a moment the unseen reality unfolding around you. While you hear these words, heaven is not silent. The angels stand ready. The voice of Saint Michael thunders still. Who is like God? This cry pierces through pride, fear, and evil. It is not simply a name, it is a declaration of victory, an anthem that shakes the foundations of darkness. And you are invited into this battle, not as a spectator, but as one who can receive protection, blessing, and transformation. Today you will not just hear about Saint Michael, you will encounter him. You will be led into prayer, reflection, and consecration to stand under his mantle of light. This day can become the turning point in your journey, the hour when your heart is set free, when your family is defended, when your spirit rises in hope. Do not take lightly what is being offered. The gates of heaven are opening, and Saint Michael's voice calls you to stand firm. The heavenly mission of Saint Michael. Saint Michael's very name is a proclamation of truth. Michael means who is like God. It is not a question seeking an answer, but a battle cry that resounds through the heavens. With this name, Saint Michael reminds all creation that no power, no force, no dominion can ever rival the Lord Almighty. His mission is not only to defend heaven, but to manifest the sovereignty of God in the face of pride and rebellion. From the very beginning, Scripture reveals his role as the leader of the heavenly hosts. In Revelation chapter 12 verse 7, we see him rise against the dragon, casting down Satan and his fallen angels. Yet this mission did not end with that celestial victory. It continues through time, reaching into the struggles of every soul. Each person who battles against sin, temptation, and despair finds in Saint Michael a defender who stands between the forces of darkness and the children of light. The prophet Daniel describes him as the great prince who stands guard over the children of your people in Daniel chapter 12 verse 1. This means that Saint Michael is not distant, nor an abstract figure of history. He is the appointed protector of God's people, entrusted with the task of guiding us through the trials of this earthly life. His mission is both cosmic and deeply personal. He fights for the church, for families, and for each individual heart that seeks refuge in God. When you invoke his name, you are not merely calling upon a symbol, but upon a warrior who has already triumphed and who continues to triumph. His sword shines with the fire of divine justice, not to destroy but to defend. not to bring fear, but to bring peace. His mission is victory, and his victory is not for himself, but for all who place their trust in God. So when you whisper his name in prayer, you are joining the eternal anthem, "Who is like God?" It is a cry that silences the voices of doubt, that pushes back the darkness that presses against your soul. Saint Michael's mission is to lead you into the certainty that you are never abandoned in your battles. Heaven fights with you, and heaven fights for you. Historical and spiritual meaning of September 29th. The 29th of September is not simply a date chosen at random. It is a day that the Church, guided by the wisdom of centuries, consecrated to the honor of St. Michael the Archangel, and later to the recognition of all the archangels who serve at the throne of God. Yet, at its heart, this day has always borne the mark of St. Michael, the Prince of the heavenly armies, the one who defends the people of God with unwavering strength. Historically, the devotion to St. Michael surged in both East and West, as Christians experienced his protection in decisive moments. In the 5th century, after the dedication of a great basilica on the Via Salaria near Rome to St. Michael, the Church began to celebrate his feast on September 29th. Over time, this date became known as Michaelmas in many Christian lands, a sacred turning point in the year that reminded the faithful of the constant presence of the Archangel in their midst. In Europe, farmers saw this day as a time of thanksgiving for the harvest, entrusting the fruits of their labor to the guardianship of St. Michael. Kings and rulers invoked him as patron of justice and protector of nations. In monasteries and churches, the solemnity of his feast was marked by fasting, prayer, and the singing of hymns that exalted his victory over the powers of darkness. Every tradition echoed the same conviction. On this day, heaven drew near to earth with special intensity. Spiritually, the Church recognizes September 29th as a day when grace flows in a particular way through the intercession of St. Michael. His mission as protector is remembered, but also experienced anew by the faithful. The faithful who gather on this feast are not only recalling what he has done, but are stepping into the living stream of his presence and power. It is a reminder that God has not left his children defenseless. He has placed over them a commander, an angel of victory, who ensures that no darkness can claim the final word. In our time, when so many feel besieged by uncertainty, fear, and spiritual warfare, this feast is more urgent than ever. September 29th is a spiritual threshold, a doorway through which those who believe may walk, finding renewed courage, protection, and hope. The Church lifts its voice with the archangels, "Who is like God?" And in that cry, heaven assures us once more that God reigns and that his angels are at work in our lives today. The cosmic battle made personal. When we hear of St. Michael battling the dragon in the book of Revelation chapter 12 verse 7, it can seem like a distant scene, a vision of heaven beyond our reach. Yet this battle is not confined to celestial realms. It reaches into the very fabric of our daily lives. The cosmic conflict between light and darkness becomes personal when you face the temptation to despair, when you wrestle with sin, when you feel the weight of fear pressing upon your heart. Saint Michael does not fight only for the glory of heaven. He fights for you. His sword is raised not merely against the devil in a vision, but against the lies whispered into your soul, the chains that hold you bound, the doubts that rob you of peace. Every time you resist evil, every time you choose to trust in God rather than surrender to fear, you are participating in his victory. His battle cry, "Who is like God?" becomes your shield, reminding you that no darkness has authority over a child of God. Consider the struggles in your own life. Perhaps they appear ordinary, a heavy burden at work, a fracture within your family, a hidden weakness you cannot seem to overcome. Yet behind these struggles lies the same battle waged in heaven. The devil seeks to weaken your resolve, to steal your hope, to draw you away from the love of God. But Saint Michael stands near, waging war on your behalf, strengthening your spirit and guarding your soul. When you pray to him, you are not asking for something vague or distant. You are calling upon the commander of heavenly armies to step into your battles, to make his cosmic fight your personal victory. His presence transforms what seems impossible. Where fear ruled, courage rises. Where despair lingered, hope awakens. Where sin enslaved, grace breaks chains. This is why the Church does not present Saint Michael merely as a distant symbol of divine power. He is an active defender, one who steps into the daily struggles of believers with real strength and heavenly fire. To call upon him is to allow the eternal battle between good and evil to take root in your story, to make your life a battlefield where victory is assured through the power of God. Signs of Saint Michael's protection. How can you know when Saint Michael has drawn near, when his sword has cut through the shadows that surrounded you? The presence of this mighty archangel often reveals itself not in dramatic visions, but in the quiet strength that rises when you thought you could not go on, in the sudden peace that enters a storm of anxiety, in the victory that comes when the odds seemed entirely against you. His protection is often hidden, but unmistakable to the heart that pays attention. There are moments when danger is averted without explanation, when a path opens that seemed forever closed, when courage fills your spirit, though fear had gripped you. These are not accidents of chance. They are signs of an angel who fights unseen battles for your sake. The prayer to Saint Michael is not empty words. It is a cry that summons the defender of God's people, and his response often comes as deliverance that you cannot logically explain. Many testify to waking from dark nights of despair with a newfound resolve, as though a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. Others speak of being preserved in moments of physical danger, rescued from what could have ended in tragedy. Some describe sudden clarity in the midst of confusion, a light that breaks through mental fog and guides them forward. Each of these is a sign of the Archangel's hand, a touch of protection from the Prince of Heaven's armies. But there are also more subtle ways he works. When a person is tempted to sin and finds an unexplainable strength to resist, when forgiveness is chosen over anger, when faith is professed in a moment of trial, Saint Michael has already been there, guarding the soul and fending off the enemy. His protection does not always manifest in outward miracles, but often in the silent victories of the heart, victories that keep a soul firmly in God's grace. If you begin to recognize these signs, your faith will deepen. You will learn to trust that you are never alone, even in the darkest hours. Saint Michael's shield is raised over you, his sword flashes in defense of your soul, and his cry, "Who is like God?" echoes as a promise that evil never has the final word. The power of prayer on this day of grace. Why is it that the prayers lifted on the feast of Saint Michael carry such extraordinary strength? It is because on this sacred day the Church unites her voice with the hosts of heaven, magnifying the intercession of the Archangel, whose mission is to protect and defend the people of God. When you pray on September 29th, you are not merely speaking words. You are joining a chorus that spans centuries, a stream of faith that has been poured out by countless souls who called upon Saint Michael and found deliverance. Prayer on this day is more than devotion. It is participation in a spiritual reality that is unfolding in the present. The angels are not distant spectators. They are active messengers of God, and when the faithful invoke them with trust, they respond with swiftness and power. The Feast of Saint Michael becomes a doorway of grace, an open channel through which the mercy of God descends with greater abundance. This is why the Church teaches us to invoke Saint Michael not only daily, but especially on his feast, when heaven seems to bend low to earth and divine protection is most intensely offered. Consider how the faithful throughout history gathered on this day. They prayed for nations in turmoil, for families in distress, for individuals caught in the snares of sin. Again and again, they testified that Saint Michael's intercession brought peace, protection, and victory. Their prayers were not in vain, and yours will not be either. When you kneel before God today and call upon the Prince of the heavenly host, you are entering into that same current of grace. It is not the length of your prayer that matters, nor the eloquence of your words. It is the faith with which you surrender to God, asking Saint Michael to defend you in battle and protect you from the snares of the enemy. On this feast, even the simplest prayer whispered from the depths of the heart becomes a flame that lights up the heavens, and Saint Michael responds with the power entrusted to him by the Almighty. So do not let this day pass as though it were ordinary. It is a day of grace, a day when prayer has the power to change the course of your life. Lift your voice, open your heart, and allow heaven's defender to carry your petitions before the throne of God. A call to spiritual weapons. Saint Michael does not only protect, he equips. His mission is not simply to shield the faithful from the enemy's attacks, but to strengthen them to stand firm in the midst of battle. Scripture reminds us in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11, to put on the full armor of God, so that you can stand against the schemes of the devil. This armor is not made of earthly steel, but of virtues and graces that turn weakness into strength and fear into unshakable courage. The weapons that Saint Michael places in our hands are spiritual yet powerful. Faith becomes a shield that extinguishes the darts of doubt and despair. Courage rises as a sword that cuts through fear, enabling us to face trials with steadfast hearts. Purity of mind and heart becomes the helmet that guards us from deception, protecting our thoughts from corruption and falsehood. Perseverance is the armor that allows us to endure, to continue the fight even when weariness tempts us to surrender. These are not abstract images, but real defenses. When you choose to believe in God's promises despite the storm, you wield the shield of faith. When you refuse to give in to fear, you raise the sword of courage. When you keep your heart clean, resisting the poison of sin, you wear the helmet of purity. And when you remain faithful through difficulty, clinging to God even in silence, you are clothed in perseverance that no enemy can pierce. Saint Michael, as commander of the heavenly hosts, does not leave you unarmed. He rallies you into the ranks of God's army, calling you to fight not with hatred or revenge, but with the blazing weapons of light. To follow him is to step into a battle where victory is assured, because it is God himself who fights through you. The cry, "Who is like God?" becomes not just his anthem but yours, a declaration that the Lord reigns and that his power is stronger than any force of darkness. Today, on this day of power, he calls you not to remain passive but to stand ready, clothed in the armor of God. He offers you weapons that cannot fail if only you take them up with faith. This is your invitation to fight as a child of light, knowing that with Saint Michael by your side, the battle belongs to the Lord and the victory is already won. Testimonies and mystical encounters. Throughout the centuries, countless voices have risen to tell of the power of Saint Michael's intercession. Voices of saints, pilgrims, and ordinary believers who experienced his protection in ways that defied explanation. These stories do not belong merely to the distant past, preserved as pious legends. They are living testimonies, still echoing today, reminding us that the Archangel remains at work in the midst of God's people, fighting for them, guiding them, and strengthening their faith. To meditate on these encounters is to realize that the presence of Saint Michael is not something far removed, but a reality that can touch the life of every believer who calls upon him with trust. One of the most striking testimonies is the apparition of Saint Michael on Mount Gargano in southern Italy during the 5th century. According to tradition, a wealthy man's bull had disappeared, and when found inside a cave, it would not leave. In frustration, the man shot an arrow toward the animal, but the arrow mysteriously turned back upon him. Troubled by this sign, The local bishop called the people to prayer and fasting, and after 3 days, the Archangel himself appeared, declaring that the cave belonged to him and should be a place dedicated to God's worship. That cave became a sanctuary unlike any other, consecrated not by human hands, but by heavenly command. From then on, Mount Gargano became a site of pilgrimage, where miracles and conversions multiplied. Pilgrims climbing the rocky path often testified that they felt an inexplicable peace enveloping them, as though the air itself carried the presence of Saint Michael. To this day, the shrine stands as a witness that the Archangel desires to dwell close to God's people, offering protection and grace. History is filled with similar encounters. Saint Joan of Arc in the 15th century declared with conviction that she was guided by the voice of Saint Michael in her mission to defend her people. Though ridiculed and doubted by many in her time, she never wavered in her testimony. To her, the Archangel's presence was not a vague inspiration, but a clear and personal guidance that gave her courage to face impossible odds. Her story reveals that Saint Michael does not act only through grand cosmic battles, but also by strengthening individual souls to carry out the mission God entrusts to them, even when the world stands against them. Mystics throughout the Church's history have described luminous visions of the Archangel, often portraying him as a figure of fire and light, radiating firmness and peace. They recount how his presence brought not only consolation, but also an urgent call to holiness and courage. For them, seeing Saint Michael was not simply a moment of comfort, it was an awakening, a reminder that the battle for souls is real and that God's army surrounds his people. These mystical experiences serve not as private privilege, but as signs to the whole Church that Saint Michael is near, vigilant and active in the unfolding of salvation. Yet his action is not reserved for saints or mystics. Ordinary believers with no claim to visions or extraordinary gifts testify to his presence in their own lives. Some recount how they narrowly escaped accidents that could have ended in tragedy, and when they look back, they recognize it as more than coincidence. Others speak of sudden healing when there seemed to be no remedy, of strength that returned after nights of despair, of clarity that came in moments of confusion. Parents speak of entrusting their children to his care and discovering peace that lifted their fears. Soldiers and travelers invoke his name and return safe from peril. Families burdened by trials call upon him and experience doors opening that they thought forever closed. Such testimonies remind us that the Archangel's mission is not to remain a distant symbol, but to act here and now. His cry, "Who is like God?" still resounds in the lives of believers. It silences the enemy's lies, drives away despair, and reminds each soul that God's power is greater than any darkness. To hear these stories is to realize that miracles are not reserved for others, not locked away in the past, but available to you today. The same Archangel who consecrated Mount Gargano, who guided Joan of Arc, who comforted mystics, is the same one who hears your prayer, who defends your soul, and who desires to fight for your family, your struggles, and your hopes. Perhaps you too have already experienced his protection without even recognizing it. That moment when a temptation seemed overwhelming, yet suddenly passed, leaving you with unexpected strength. That day when you felt surrounded by fear, and yet a quiet peace settled upon your heart. That time when you were at the edge of despair, and a light of hope returned as if from nowhere. These may well have been moments when St. Michael stood beside you, shielding you with his sword, covering you with his wings, interceding before the throne of God for your sake. The testimonies of history, the visions of saints, and the quiet stories of ordinary people all converge in one truth. St. Michael is not absent. He is present, he is powerful, and he is fighting for you. His mission is not finished, and his protection is not limited. To call upon him is to invite the commander of heaven's armies into your life, to allow him to wage battle on your behalf, and to trust that his intercession can open paths you never thought possible. These testimonies are not merely to be admired, but to be embraced as invitations. They are reminders that if you open your heart in prayer, if you lift your voice with faith, you too may one day give your own testimony, declaring with certainty that the Archangel fought for you, and that through his intercession, your life was changed forever. The transformative prayer experience. At the heart of this day of power stands not only reflection, but encounter. To hear of St. Michael's mission is inspiring, to recall his victories is uplifting, but to enter into prayer with him is to step into the very reality of heaven's battle and to allow its strength to flow into your soul. Prayer to St. Michael is not a mere recitation of words. It is an act of surrender, a choice to align your heart with God's will and to accept the protection of the Archangel who has been entrusted with guarding his people. When you pray with faith, you are not speaking into emptiness. You are entering into communion with the living God and with his heavenly hosts. The words become more than sound. They become a shield raised over your spirit, a sword placed in your hand, a light cast into the shadows that press against you. In this moment, prayer becomes transformative because it does not leave you where you are. It lifts you, strengthens you, and breathes divine courage into your heart. On this feast day, the power of prayer is magnified. Heaven bends near to those who call upon St. Michael, and the Archangel himself, faithful as ever, comes to the aid of those who ask. In the silence of prayer, you may not always feel a vision or hear a voice, yet grace moves in hidden ways. Burdens grow lighter, fears lose their hold, temptations lose their sting. It is here that prayer transforms, not by removing every trial instantly, but by making you victorious in the midst of them. Imagine kneeling in the presence of God, calling upon St. Michael, and consecrating your life to divine protection. As you do, you are not simply making a request. You are placing yourself beneath the mantle of heaven's greatest defender. You are joining the eternal anthem, "Who is like God?" and declaring that your life belongs to the Lord who cannot be defeated. This consecration is not symbolic, but real. It is a spiritual act that claims divine strength for your journey, peace for your family, and protection for your soul. The more fully you give yourself in prayer, the more deeply the transformation takes root. It is not about the length of time or the eloquence of words. It is about the sincerity of your heart, the trust you place in God, and the openness with which you allow the Archangel to fight for you. The fruit of such prayer is unmistakable: renewed hope, clarity of mind, courage in the face of fear, and a deep assurance that you are never alone. This moment of prayer is your invitation to step into the reality that the saints have lived, that countless believers have testified to, that the Church celebrates with joy on this sacred day. It is your chance to experience for yourself what generations have proclaimed, that when you pray with St. Michael, your life is touched by the power of heaven and nothing remains the same. Closing with hope and promise. September 29th is not simply a commemoration, but a threshold. To pass through this day with faith is to allow the protection of St. Michael to unfold in your life with new strength. The Church does not celebrate this feast as a distant remembrance of what God once did, but as a proclamation of what he continues to do through his mighty Archangel. This very moment is filled with grace, and if you open your heart, heaven itself bends down to meet you. Perhaps you carry burdens that seem immovable, wounds that have lingered too long, fears that return again and again. On this day, you are invited to believe that nothing is beyond the reach of God's power. Through the intercession of St. Michael, those chains can break, those shadows can flee, and those battles that once seemed endless can be turned into victories. The cry, "Who is like God?" is more than a reminder. It is a promise. It assures you that no force of evil, no depth of despair, no weight of sin can ever stand against the Lord of hosts. When you invoke Saint Michael, you are not alone in your struggles. You are defended by the one who cast down the dragon, who leads the armies of heaven, who has never lost a battle in service of God's will. To place your trust in his intercession is to stand under the shield of divine protection. It is to allow your life to be marked by the fire of courage and the light of faith. As this day closes, do not let its grace pass you by. Lift your heart once more in prayer, asking Saint Michael to remain by your side, to guard your family, to defend your soul, and to lead you into the fullness of God's promises. Leave behind despair and carry forward hope. Step out of fear and walk clothed in courage. Let today mark the turning point, the moment you will look back on and say, "Here, on the feast of Saint Michael, heaven fought for me, and my life was never the same." This is the promise of September 29th. It is not just another day. It is the day heaven fights for you. It is the day the Archangel lifts his sword on your behalf. If you open your heart, if you believe with trust, your life can and will be transformed. For God is faithful, his angels are near, and through the intercession of Saint Michael, the victory is already yours.